this is a very interesting talk which we're going to have with some industry experts over here. For many, our industry was designed a very different way. The way we typically used to get our ingredients, blend them, put them in a container, put some evidence out there, and then just believe that marketing and supply chain will take care of it. That was a very classical model. But what's happening that now this sector is growing tremendous. Pharmaceutical companies are trying to get in, food companies are trying to get in, and this entire thing is changing so fast. AI is coming and reducing the time to innovation. Uh, Doctors are going to read your labels, regulators are going to read your data, and consumers are going to read both of them, data as a label. So now what it just puts us there that next decades, how this industry is going to play out. It will be playing out for the companies who are going to move from formula-led business to evidence-led business. And I'm so happy that today I have a distinguished panel with me. And these are the people who have been on the forefront of this thing much before, everybody hit. They're ahead of curve. They started it a long time back. I'm happy to introduce all of you here. Unfortunately, we are missing another panelist today. Unfortunately, for a personal loss, she could not join us today. With me is Dr. Rachna Boite. She is head of nutrition, science, and clinical research in Dr. Reddy Laboratories. She has been ahead of curve for many, many years. I've been reading her published papers, and they're really remarkable in the sense of evidence generation. Then, of course, we have ever known Dr. Mishra from Dabur and Kanchanji from Mankind Pharma. So let's, for the sake of timing, let's jump into the questions right away. So I'll start with you, Rachna. Uh, so you basically, you have been actually very few people who have been out there in the forefront of this entire thing, where you have combined the nutrition science and clinical research together. And I would say in so many ways, it was very pioneering thing what you guys have done in Dr. Reddy's. And I think it was mostly driven by your pharmaceutical background and your pharmaceutical, DNA of the company. So when you see, the evidence generation today, sometimes we think, medical affairs is sitting in different building, clinical is sitting in one building, and the supply chain is somewhere else. Where do you think all this is going to lead to? Because you are ahead of curve, you can actually see the future that where the R&D, the clinical, medical affairs, where they're going to combine for generating a new product.
Sure. So I see this as a theory of 24 versus 42. So what's this theory? The strategies are designed in a room which is 24 degree, while it is executed at a 42 degree in the ground. So if you just sit in the isolation, if you're sitting in 24 degrees designing a product, high chances are there that at 42 degree it will not work, because the struggles there are very different. Sitting in a room, you feel it's a strategy, but over there it's all human. So from that perspective, you see R&D, medical affairs has to work hand in hand. Otherwise, you will not get the best product out, and that product will not work on the consumer insights. And when I talk about this, we work with the doctors quite a lot. For example, R&D can bring a beautiful product, high foundation, but insights are very important for developing any product. When the insights are right, the product development happens in a very good way. For example, medical affairs gives you right insights. They do FGDs with the doctors, they do the ad boards with the doctors, they interact in and out with the doctors, the patients, and come up with the right insight. For example, I can talk over here. You are developing best of the product, and you have developed a product which a patient has to take 9 scoops in a day. That cancer patient will not be able to take that 9 scoop at a time. Your medical affair will take that in cancer patient, the intake has gone low. You have to develop a product which is very concise. It will give you high protein in low dosage. So then if R&D takes that insight and develops a product, it becomes more meaningful. For example, R&D will say, oh, I have got a beautiful or a very delicious flavor of chocolate. But if you are developing a product for cancer patient, because of the chemotherapy and radiotherapy, there is a taste alteration. Now, when this taste alteration happens, the research has shown that the citrus flavors work well with them. So these are the insights which a medical team brings it on table. So you have to work in stimulation. A second example, value proposition, if we talk about, at the ICU or in the ward, if you develop any product which has to be given by tube feeding, for example, that product is developed for made for everybody. It has to be kept there for 2 hours, 3 hours, and it flows through the tube. So those insights coming from the medical, that product you develop should not sediment. The homogenization has to be so well when the product is made that it has to withstand the temperature of the ward, which is almost 32 degrees or 38 degrees, and it should not settle till 4 hours. That's very important. We work with the multiple geographies also. For example, if you are developing a product for India, my R&D will tell that, oh, we have made a very good product which is high protein and it will be delivering a very good quality protein to the India market. But whenever you develop any product and if you are dealing in multiple countries, you should take the medical inputs and see to it like what is the scenario at the ground level in another country. For example, we talk about Vietnam. Any product we develop for India, which is a high protein, low carb, may not work in Vietnam because there the requirement is very less. The protein is within 20 to 22% and they need calories also. Because here we are suffering from higher energy intake or obesity in diabetes, there only 1 to 2% of patients are obese. So from that perspective, I feel that if they work in synergy, the outcome can be better. So they both are like working in depth of science, but in a parallel universe. So in Dr. Reddy's per se, what we bring is they come on table. Any product innovation, they have to come together. The insights have to be on the table. What is the end user? So complete patient journey has to be mapped, and then the product development starts.
Excellent points. I mean, I think what you're mentioning, the patient journey, and I think we often forget when we're forwarding something that the first thing which consumers see is not the science, or sometimes they don't even wanted to understand the science. For them, experiential is everything. How they take a product, how they feel, how they, once they put in their mouth, how they feel about it. That brings me to you, Dr. Mishra. So you come from something which is, bridging a tradition to science, which is very interesting. There are very few companies like Dabar out there in India, and then we have a rich tradition of Ayurveda. You, as a scientist and as a doctor, an Ayurvedic doctor, how do you, kind of make this match between a tradition, a traditional product, and an evidence-based product? Because what I'm seeing more and more that the consumer is changing. We have people like us who believe in traditional medicine with our eyes closed because, this is something that has been good for us for many years. But then there are Gen Zers, Gen Xers, you have millennials out there and they will Google everything. before actually the movement. They see the label, and what was bringing in the beginning that the labels have been read by doctors, data by regulators, and consumers reading both of them. So how do you find this match? How to really make sure that evidence is represented in a product?
Yeah, good question, Dr. Anand. So now let me brief, if you permit me, around a minute or half. Like the matter is very complex. So you speak of any botanicals, whether it is an Ayurvedic inscripted botanical, or it is botanical medicine as per US FDA, or it is a natural health product in Canada, or you can say as an advanced health sciences or product basically for Malaysia or basically Europe and UK MHRA. The principle lies basically in three as a head R&D, and we have different teams like phytochemistries and then medical affairs. I head the medical affairs, clinical research, pharmacovigilance, and then formulation scientist. Along with we have a very dedicated department which is basically called as bioresource development. So in the natural product, the most authentic is the chemistry. That means if my source ingredient is identified a better way, I have win my formulation by 50%. For example, we say like single botanical ingredients. For example, you can say Brahmi, which morning we are discussing like Bacopa moneri in a extract form in the standardized. Recently, we are developing a product called Dabur 1884, which is going to USA, and luckily I am the formulator designer. The product is going to launch in US market by September 2026. 13 product we are launching that. So example is that what is the first is my identification of my raw material by chemistry. One second thing is that there are many plant part materials available which are adulterated. That is another big source in the natural product industry, is whether it is extraction or it is a formulation company like Dabur or Himalaya, whoever maybe. So the first what we have to do is basically we identify called DNA fingerprinting. So there are 78 DNA fingerprintings laboratory are already there. So when the plant material we are collecting, our scientists of the bioresource development scientists, they are analyzing that, say that okay, this particular plant part is matching to this originally. What is my formulation design? Either is a patent proprietary formulation or is a classical, a critical product are identified. Second, basically, we have to identify basically by the lead factor, by the in vitro pharmacology, because in vitro is not accepted legally or regulatory wise, but it helps a lot to scientists like us in medical affairs or in formulation to see that out of the 4 or 5 formulation what it design, which is really giving me more hinting towards a little bit lead of efficacy. For example, like Chyawanprash. So Chyawanprash is a very classical product. We say, okay, this is for immunity, and which Dabur we are creating as a new particular entity, where preclinical already be completed, clinical we are going to start very soon. That does this particularly suppose superfood, is it having helpful for preventing or modulating your protecting effectivity for the PM 2.5? So for that what it did, we have done this in vitro to analyze on the bronchial fluids, like what does it anti-inflammatory markers reduce in IL-6 or any inflammatory marker, what is the ORAC value of my formulation, so that I can feel my antioxidant comparable to ascorbic acid, and we found that 12 gram of Chyawanprash, which designed Dabur for 100 years back, the same formula is giving almost 2x of the antioxidant potential. So we achieved the one. Third thing is that does it have a modulation activity for viral load reduction, and does it have effectivity in cardiomodulatory activity? Then we move forward for getting that in vivo for like, okay, like recently we have developed a formulation for anti-diabetic berberine, hydrochloride. So then we found that, okay, out of the 3 molecule whatever planning to make it, does it helpful to my going for like whether it is reducing my lipids in the liver, does it reducing lipids in pancreas, so then I can go for that, okay, this particular product is anti-diabetic, but also it support for non-alcoholic hepatitis disorder. Again, we go for the clinical evaluation. After 10 screening, go to 2. Then clinical significance, either you go for market comparator, or it may be the own that open label, or the double blinded, or double arm, or triple arm. Then we have conducted this presently, the particular product is going to study at Jodhpur Medical College. Same Chyawanprash, also PM 2.5, we are tying up with another medical institute in Delhi, also Lucknow, to compare it, how does it go. Even BHU also part of that. After everything is completed, then we find that what is my CMC, my chemistry, manufacturing compliances. Once everything is done, whether it's Chyawanprash traditional or is patent property, every product we do for that and ensure that tech transfer completed smoothly for the complexity, simplicity, and then we deliver the product to the market, following by the stringent of pharmaceutical norms of this formulation, followed by pharmacovigilance.
Good. I mean, that's really, describes the kind of evidence generation which you're, taking a lot of length of pain to really generate and actually address the market in a new way with the old products. Kanchan, you have lived through a very interesting, series. You have been with regulator, ICMR. You have been with really leading companies out there. And I think, from all of us, you have the kind of breadth of experience which really is remarkable. So once you look at evidence generation, how it looks like to, basically you create something which is going to kind of present the same evidence to a doctor, a regulator, a consumer all at once. How does that, this kind of scenario builds out on a product?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Anand. I think it's a very relevant one. We are living in an era where nutraceuticals is just not seen a single eye. It's actually been seen by the HCPs, physicians, the regulators, and the consumers nowadays. And all three of them, have different questions in place. The physicians come out and ask that, does it really work? The regulators actually come up and ask that, can you actually substantiate the claim? And the consumers say that whether we can trust your product or not. So that's that's the battle we are right now fighting when we see nutraceuticals or the nutrition, products evolving. And as you rightly mentioned that I have seen across the breadth across organizations, there are 4 layers to this. What happens is it's just not about that product. It's about the clinical evidence. And when I say clinical evidence, it starts from the ingredient itself, that whether the ingredient is clinically backed, and if we have the ingredient as clinically backed, whether the formulation will work or not, because it's just not about a single ingredient that we put into a product, but it's an amalgamation of ingredients that we use, and hence the bioavailability, the effectiveness, the efficacy comes as a question. So hence formulation evidence also becomes as important as a single clinically backed ingredient is. The third important thing is, of course, on the clinical trials that we talk about, which is the population evidence, whether it will suit the targeted population or not. So hence having a study on those particular population where we plan to launch a product is very, very critical and important. And the last thing which most of us miss out is the RWE studies, which is the post-marketing, where there is uncontrolled scenarios where you don't have controlled clinical trials, and it's the real world data where you conduct observational studies, you see how your product is actually performing, and you have not kept a stimulated segment or a stimulated controlled environment for that product to work. That's where the real win is. And if I see throughout my span of career from ICMR to JSK to Sun to Nestle and now at Mankind, population evidence is something which ICMR has actually been working on, and there's a lot of data that plays a very important role. For example, when we talk about population evidence, people go out in the market, and that's where marketeers create a marketing gimmick to an extent where small clinical trials, where the study size or the sample size is just 100 or might be just 150, and we are trying to extrapolate it to a population of 1.4 billion. Might be someone must have conducted some study way back there in Chennai, where the temperature conditions are different, where the demographic conditions are different, where might be a little different genotype or phenotype is present. A South Indian might not, means I'm not being a bias, of course, across country, but that morphology might not work somewhere in the north. So hence to have an evidence which covers almost across the country would make some relevance and some some scientific evidence for the HCPs or for the regulators to believe. And off late, I'll tell you what has happened. Even FSSAI has become quite stringent with this. If you go with small studies or small sample size, like, clinical data, they ask you that how is West India going to respond to this? You have conducted something in the East India, especially like, if I talk about children where, or might be like, growing teenagers, where you see in East India, they are especially a little short heighted. Hence, might be when you do a study on a nutrition formula where you have seen like, a drastic change in the increase in height or weight, might not be a case in North where genetically people are known to be taller. So hence that significance will not be relevant. Hence to cover the entire country becomes very important. And that's what ICMR preaches, and that's what even FSSAI is demanding these days. Coming up to on the consumer communication or the evidence that we talk about, it is very important we translate science into appropriate claims and appropriate consumer communications, and not bring in that exaggerated evidence where we say the bone health increases by 2x or 2x bone density improves, which practically becomes quite misleading, because throughout the study you must not have seen that there has been a 2x increase in bone density. It is just a part of the study that a marketeer must have poked out and put it on the claim on the pack. So that becomes really important, that how we use these claims. And coming back to the pharma world where it actually works with clinical evidence, because that's how doctors believe, that's how they practice, that without appropriate evidence, and that too an evidence which is being studied in different populations, in different demographic conditions and different therapeutic areas persistently, that's where your nutrition or your nutraceutical product actually wins the game. Otherwise a small concentrated study would not help at the end of the day. So that's what I would want to summarize with this.
Excellent. I think what you really raise, what there's a need to really get into something like vigilance. What we say that you made a product, you did the research, you did a control trial, and it goes to real world where people, you don't know what all they are eating, what other medicines they're taking, what interactions are happening in the real world. And it's so critical, to create something like that where we can measure it, we can see it, and actually we can make the course correction down the line. So it's really, really important point you raised. And I think none of the talks, we can complete without mentioning the AI, that's something I want to bring it back to Rachna. Your Dr. Reddy is one company who I would say is using AI responsibly. So there are companies who are using AI as a marketing veneer to really, put authoritative language out there where there are not many evidence-based claims. And then there are companies like you who are actually using AI in a very different way to really reduce your speed to kind of, reach a point where you're going to go and start evidence generation from that point. So how do you see that, the AI use in your experience? What's the right way to really put this, in R&D perspective where it can be used more effectively and actually reducing your workload a little bit?
Sure. If you see AI in clinical research, so clinical research spans from development of protocol itself, right? And when you develop a protocol, a lot of investment goes behind a clinical. And what is the probability of success? If you have these three ingredients at this dosage, will your clinical be successful or not? So AI comes in play over there. We have models where we give the input of formulation, what is the sample size we are intending to do, and what's the probability of success you're going to get. From that perspective, if we say that these are the outcomes, your sample size has to be 120 and not 100, otherwise the probability of success is low, we take it into account. While development of protocol itself, the number of subjects, the powering of the study, what are the clinical outcomes you want to see, that all becomes very important, and AI helps you in doing that so that your probability of success increases. One of the important point in doing the clinical, at least for nutrition, it's the uh, factors, the confounding factors which you control by the inclusion factors which we see. And for nutrition, we see to it that the inclusion criteria and the exclusion criteria are very tight, because we need to see the efficacy of the product in a long term. Because for any nutrition you give, minimum you will have to give it for 1 month or 3 months, right? Suppose you are testing for PEA on pain management, the minimum you have to give is 3 weeks. Suppose you want to check any of the ingredient on cholesterol mechanism, you will have to give it for 3 months. So if it's a long-term study and you have a very tight control on the inclusion and the exclusion criteria, the patient recruitment plays a very important role, right? Most of the time we spend a lot of time in patient recruitment where screening comes into play. You screen a patient, if they are according to your inclusion and exclusion criteria, you take them in your study. We have got AI tools where you only scan the face and they give you your blood pressure, their BP. I mean, all the biochemical parameters are there. Based on that, we take the patient in the study and we do the blood parameters. So there we get a faster recruitment, we get a homogenized samples for our clinical study, and at the same time we save the money of screening, because for a simple screening of a patient we spend from almost 4,000 to 5,000 rupees for doing all the biochemical parameters to include him in the study. Suppose is a PCOS study, you will have to do all the hormonal pre, post, inclusion and all. So with this kind of AI techniques coming in, it helps in making the clinical study faster, the probability of success increases, and the cost which goes behind it reduces.
Excellent. I think the way you're using these tools for your R&D and your clinical evidence generation is the right way to do that. That'll bring me to Dr. Mishra. AI is as good as the data you feed, and I believe the kind of data you guys have at Dabur is something I would love to have a look at that. You have years of data of your products development, sales, what is being repeat sales is happening in the market, and then you can always tie this entire thing up into efficacy and what really worked, what didn't really work. So when you use language based model, LLM model, and basically try to look into your own data, how do you think this is going to help you to actually design things for future based on the data which is very proprietary, which is very belong to your company? How do you see that use of the data in the future R&D efforts?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dr. Anand. The data what Dabur is having for last 110 years, like beyondly by 15 years or 20 years before, there was softwares are not so very high. It was on the in the lab modules written. So recently we are implementing the leans, to incorporate integrate the entire data between different departments, because we don't sit in India, we sit in across global. So first of all, we are connecting the data by links, so that every lab connected by India, US, UK, all are connected by the single data system. Secondly, what happened, we are started a new department is called Dabur Learning Academy, DLA. So there we have all the detail of our data is related to R&D, chemistry, clinical, preclinical, and your training modules, everything are designed, and I'm a part of the Dabur Learning Academy as a founding member. And third thing, what happened basically, like Nutrify stands my one of the favorite, because recently like Dr. Munib and team, we have done AI for, like, we have designed a woman supporting nutraceutical, particularly botanical polyherbal formulation, like how does it work and what are the clinical as given. Like when I designed my along with my scientists of the 7 or 8 ingredient doses, we wanted to know like what are the clinicals as conducted, what are the clinical conducted, what is the negative marker, what is negative assay in terms of chemistry, what are the in vitro data says, Are you a right drug? The doses identification. So all this can help, a great help on Nutrify, usually we do. So same thing, the claim substantiation, like, okay, this particular plant, where it is used, how, what part used, what exhaustive data Dr. Munib has given to us in the particular part, and thanks to Dr. Mr. Amit also. So now AI can help us to my CMC, like chemistry, manufacturing compliances. AI can help me in vitro data, my clinical significance, my preclinical, my toxicity, my safety, my pharmacovigilance, any reaction started, which country has banned, which country restricted, because it is very complex. It's not like, like synthetic drugs, whatever we speak in one dictionary. Then what is the WHO monograph says? What is Australia monograph? What exactly happened in EMEA? All data we can generate AI. But what we cannot generate AI is the my good collection and cultivation practices. AI cannot give a record generation. AI cannot give me 100% valid document. What doctor can give the data to me whenever our team, like market research team, which goes for different doctors consultation, consumer consultation, and valued customer consultation, those data AI cannot provide. So there are certain, lacunas in AI in the secondary part, but I can believe that in my particularly formulation R&D, we are using AI for the CMC part.
Excellent. So, Kanchan, that bring me. Dr. Mishra mentioned about international regulation, international compliance. You work for Mankind, which is known to be most aggressive company in India, and the growth really shows that. When you see the aspiration of the company, to be leaders, worldwide leaders for making products, and when you are sitting at R&D and designing a product, do you think AI can help you to design something which is going to be geographical specific and still, part of your development process? You're still doing the same rigor on your R&D, but outputs you're creating for US, for MENA, for Africa, for Southeast Asia. Do you think AI can help you somewhere to really reduce the kind of, strain which is going to create in this process?
Very relevant one, because what we were actually discussing in my first question is to have that population evidence, and that brings in a lot of cost and a lot of time. Sometimes, organizations fail to do those population evidence just because of the time and the cost that's invested. Hence, AI brings in that leverage for us to create those in silico models and have some relevant data across different demographics. As we say, if I have to launch a product somewhere in US or might be in MENA, in those regions, I can stimulate those through AI, have the evidence generated, and it can fast track my process. But yes, with a caveat and caution that it can drive and it can give you answers faster, but we should not establish and declare it, because it should always be replicated through some physical model somewhere and work hand in hand along with a collaborative physical model, and just not rely on the AI part. A very small example, like if we have to design a clinical trial or a clinical study, AI can do it in hours for you, versus a person sitting and creating like those trials for over months. That's where you save the cost. But yes, once it is created, it has to run through the human validation and just not rely on what AI can give you. Also, an important thing, with AI coming in so vast, part of our lives it has taken, and especially in R&D, people have been using it so in and out. The only, the caveat that it has is that it can replicate to an extent of 80 to 90%, but not 100% completely. And that margin of 10 to 20%, of course, will need a validation when you go and put it on ground. At times, like I mentioned, and I saw Dr. Rachna also mentioning that there are scans, there are face scans available. There are even these CBGs, which we say, the continuous glucose monitoring devices that we have, that has been mapped with your Apple Watch or other wearables and data collectors, which can give you fast, instant data. That's where the collection becomes very easy for us, where the patient does not have to visit labs. Nobody has to follow up. You can just send the device to their homes and get data instantly sitting in your laboratory. So that's the time reduction that AI has seen. And yes, with Mankind being so aggressive, Of course, we are working a lot with AI, and it is helping us a lot, even designing and developing a lot of concepts and a lot of products as well. But the only thing is that we don't declare it faster. We use it to get our answers, but do not put it on the paper or on the evidence until unless it's validated. Yeah.
That's the points. And I think what I see, I was making notes when I was listening to my panelist. Three things appear in this entire, what we discuss here. The first thing is that R&D and medical affairs cannot meet at the launch meetings anymore. I think we have to create a new meeting, what we call a molecule market meeting, where everybody gets together. You have your marketing, who is going to defend your claims, your medical affairs, who is going to underwrite them, and your R&D team, which is going to decide which molecule to use. That comes as a very central theme. Second, which I noticed that AI is real and it's here. It's going to stay, but it's a evidence multiplier, not an evidence generator. So that's what I'm gathering out of you.
And over here, I would like to add, like AI reduces your time for evidence, but it should not reduce your evidence itself.
That's so critical, And then I think all the companies who confuse these two, that evidence generator and evidence multiplier, they'll get caught at the regulators level. Very, very easy. I mean, that's very easy. Third, what I'm thinking that India's Ayurvedic legacy is not a credibility problem. It's a credibility asset. As long as we think in this kind of way, but only if we use the standardization and clinical rigor behind it. So you have been given an asset of 9,000 plants with described medicine thing. All you have to do is just go and find evidence for that. It's so simple. Actually, it's right in front of us. And instead of actually competing in 20 products who everybody else makes it, let's go on and explore those 9,000 plants. So it's a huge opportunity for industry out here. And I think we are at the inflection point where, our own customers are start asking us the evidence, which will drive us to really drive these kind of thing more. So I think we really learned a lot from the panel today, and I really thank to all of you. You want to add something, Kanchi?
Yeah. So basically, just to what you were just mentioning, but we are so huge in terms of manufacturing. We are so huge in terms of understanding nutrients. We have the muscle power as a country, and for us, it's the evidence generation that will actually play an important role for our products to go and get marketed somewhere in US, somewhere in UK, or some other countries. It's all about the evidence, and we have it right here to create that evidence because we have that expertise, we have those manufacturing units, and we have that population also to create that evidence which can fit in those global areas and will help us submit those dossiers also and get some global approvals as well. So that's the next big thing that we see in nutraceuticals, and that's where we say that we are actually moving from illness to wellness. And it's no more illness now, it's more towards wellness and having that preventive approach.
Excellent point. With that, I'll open the floor for any questions. If you have anybody have a question with our panelists. Perfect. So thank you so much for your time today.